Instead of going out completely to Gentile sources, Nehemiah is going to take us into these ancient sources. This is for those who really want to know the truth. Nehemiah, please.
And serious scholars, I'm not talking about, wackadoodles on Facebook. I'm talking about serious university scholars who are trying to understand how the name was pronounced, the name of the Father was pronounced in ancient times, will go to the depths of every pagan, magical, and Gnostic source, anybody but the Jews. And it's somewhat of a mystery of why they won't look at Jewish sources. And I started doing some study about this a few months back. I'd read a book in which this one scholar had said, a serious scholar, he said this name Yehovah is a distinctly Christian form, that no Jew ever thought the name was Yehovah, and it was simply the Christians misunderstanding what they saw in the Hebrew manuscripts. And it got me to ask a question I'd never asked before. And the question it forced me to ask, it made me ask, was, what do the rabbis say the name is? We have an actual conspiracy that's described in the Babylonian Talmud. We even have the name of the head conspirator. His name is Rabba Bar Bar Chana. It's kind of a hard name to say. Rabba Bar Bar Chana. And he lived around the year 250 to 300 AD. And he says as follows. He said, sages transmit the four-letter name to their disciples once in a 7-year period. So what he's describing is, by the year 250, Jews were no longer commonly speaking the name. It had been forbidden by the Romans, and there was an internal reason to suppress people healing in the name. Jews, and probably also Jews who believed in Yeshua, who were healing in the name of the Father, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and the rabbis wanted to suppress this, the Romans wanted to suppress this, so everybody was happy, right? But the rabbis still preserved this name, and they preserved it by transmitting it from rabbi to disciple once every 7 years. So that's a conspiracy of silence. We know, meaning we, the rabbis, know what the name is. We don't want the multitudes, and definitely not the Christians, to know. We said, let's just ban it. And they said, we'll ban it until when the Messiah comes. And they talk about how it's not permissible to speak it in this world, but in the world to come when the Messiah reigns as king, then we'll speak the name. But to preserve the name, they transmitted it rabbi to disciple once every 7 years. So
now in that was actually a ceremony.
So you're jumping ahead because I told you about this.
Oh,
Here,
okay.
Yeah,
we're letting you.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah, we're letting you in on what we get to do for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Right.
You get a little bit of this, and so this
right,
is so
last
exciting.
night Michael got the 6-hour version. I'm going to give you the condensed version this time, guys. Anyway, and I got to tell you a funny story about this. So I went to get an update. You got to get an update every few years on this database. And I went to get the update, and I paid the money for the update. It was a couple $100. And they say, okay, well, we have a guy in Jerusalem that you can get it from. You don't have to come all the way to Tel Aviv, where Bar-Ilan University is located. So I go to somebody's apartment in Jerusalem, and he's an ultra-Orthodox Jew, and he looks at me and he says, why do you want this database? This is 100,000 books written by rabbis. You're not wearing a kippah. Why would you be interested in this? And I said, I paid the money. Are you not going to give it to me? And I got all defensive. And he says, no, I'm seriously, genuinely asking. I've never seen somebody who doesn't wear a kippah, who's not an ultra-Orthodox Jew, be interested in a database of 100,000 rabbinical books. And I said, well, I'm a researcher of ancient Jewish sources. All right, no problem. I'm not trying to start a fight. I've just never seen it before. So I get this database, Michael.
Calm down there.
Right, well, so I get this database, and I'm asking the question, are there any rabbis who say what the name is? And I think, I don't think there are. If there were, I would have heard about it, right? I put it's a flash drive, I put it in, it's all in Hebrew. Even the interface is in Hebrew. It doesn't say search, it says chapes, right? So I type it in, and I do a little search, and I'm like, I know I'm not going to find it. Within 30 seconds, I found a rabbi who said the name is Yehovah. Within literally 30 seconds. Within literally 30 seconds, I found a rabbi who said the name, the Shema Mifurash, the explicit name, the unequivocal name, is with the vowels Shva, Cholam, Kamatz, and you're going to hear that, guys, over and over today. Shva, Cholam, Kamatz, those are the names of the vowels. They have names, the vowels. Shva is that little E in Yehovah, Cholam is the O, and the Kamatz is the A. And I was sitting there shaking. I didn't think I would find it. And there I found it in 30 seconds. And I realized if I found this in 30 seconds, and all I did was search in the database, that means nobody's ever looked. Because if they'd have looked, they would have found it in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have taken them 5 minutes. I'm good. But literally nobody's ever looked to see what do the rabbis say the name is, and why don't they look? He's called the Vilna Gaon, which means the genius of Vilna. So he says the vowels of the name itself are hidden. Its vowels are the secret of the Tetragrammaton. Okay, so the modern 20th century encyclopedia written in Hebrew by rabbis say, well, the rabbis didn't know what the vowels were. Is that what he says?
No.
No, he says they're hidden.
Right.
He doesn't say he doesn't know what they are.
Doesn't say don't know how to pronounce it.
He's not saying I don't know how to pronounce it. He's saying this is hidden. We don't reveal this secret, which is a big difference. So what I do is I look up the source, and it doesn't say what they claim it says. And they transmitted it every 7 years. Surely there must be a trace of that somewhere in Jewish literature. While I was doing this research, I stumbled upon a reference to something called Sefer Hashem, the Book of the Divine Name. It's by a rabbi named Elazar Rokeach. So this is a book that remained in handwritten manuscript form even after printing was invented because it was considered so secret. And it wasn't until the 21st century, so someone in 2004 for the first time printed a book from 1225. And what he describes is this elaborate ceremony. And in the elaborate ceremony, you have a rabbi and a disciple who go through a purification process. They fast and they immerse themselves in a mikveh of water, and then they don white clothing, and then they do something a little bit strange at first until you read it in Hebrew. And by the way, this is it was printed for the first time in 2004 after nearly 800 years, and it's never been translated into English. In fact, the general public will hear this text for the first time ever in English. If I read you a little excerpt here, it's never been translated into English. Okay. And it says one of the part of the ceremony is they stand up to their ankles in water. It seems really strange. And it talks earlier in the ceremony, they reveal the name over water. The rabbi will then open his mouth after all this preparation in awe and say, "Blessed are you," and then he speaks the name. Yehovah, our God, King of the universe, Yehovah, God of Israel, you are one and your name is one. And Michael, you are one and your name is one. That's a reference to Zechariah 14, verse 9. And so at that moment, they both recite together the verse based on their interpretation, the sound of Yehovah upon the water. And at that moment, the rabbi has spoken it once by himself and a number of times by itself. The disciple heard it after this whole ceremony, and then they speak it together to make sure the disciple heard it correctly. And this is something that the rabbis were doing in 1225. So this idea that, the Jews might have known the name in ancient times, but because of the ban, they forgot it. That's not consistent with the Jewish sources. And remember, this is a source that most scholars don't know about. What that tells you is we don't need to go to the Gnostic sources or pagan sources or Christian sources who didn't know Hebrew or Latin sources. We have rabbis who knew the name. Now, I could stop here, but there's another source that confirms this. And this is a source that was written in Hebrew around the year 1450 by a little-known rabbi in Jerusalem named Joseph ibn Sayach. And he wrote a book that's never been printed, even today. So if you wanted to read this in Hebrew, there's only one place you can find it. And I actually have here the manuscript, a photo of the manuscript. This is the original by the author. There's only one copy that ever existed, and we have his copy. And they say as follows: a certain sage has been uttering the name according to its letters, and a certain rabbi rebuked him for this. but the sage was stubborn in his actions. So he's being rebuked for speaking the name, but I thought the Jews don't know the name, right? That's the one thing all scholars can agree on. We should go look at the Gnostic. We should go look at the Greeks. We should go look at the Christians. Anybody but the Jews, because the Jews don't know the name. But here we have one source of a rabbi transmitting the name to his disciple. And the second case, not only does the rabbi receive the name from his rabbi, but he's speaking it out loud and getting in trouble for it. And the interesting thing is Ibn Sayyah rebukes the sage for speaking the name. He says, you're sinning. You're not allowed to speak this name. It's forbidden by our tradition, not by the Torah, but by our tradition. So, what we've established here is that the rabbis did know how to pronounce the name. Now, I have here a map of 16 rabbis from all over the Jewish world, and you can see they go from Spain to Egypt to even Israel, Tzfat and Jerusalem, Eastern Europe, and this is, of course, the modern locations. You know, some of these go back to the year 1300. Rabbis who said the name is Yehovah. Some of them go into the 20th century. Ovadia Yosef, who is the leading rabbi of the Sephardic Jews in Israel, who only died a few years ago in the 21st century, in one of his books, he states matter-of-factly that the vowels are Shvach Olam Kamatz, which is Yehovah.
Yeah.
I mean, he states it as a fact. Like, it's not even a fact that's in dispute. I spent months searching and researching. It was not easy at all to find.
Yep. And one of the things that has been taught in the Western Gentile Christian world is that Yod He Vav He, that they inserted the vowels of Adonay in it.
That's one of the claims.
And that's
a fact.
That's a fact.
That's
but
not
what
true.
is it? It's not true. It's just plain not true at all.
It's not true at all, and it's not what the rabbis thought either. And I'll tell you, Michael, I searched those databases for Yahweh, and I couldn't find it. But what I did find is rabbis repeatedly saying that the name is Yehovah. And so one of them is a rabbi in the 14th century named Menachem Tzioni. And he writes a commentary, and in his commentary in Exodus 3:15, which is the verse where God reveals his name, and he's commenting on the words, Zeh Shmi Le'olam, this is my name forever. And this is what he says. He says there's also a secret here received by tradition in the vowels of this is my name forever. What does that mean? Well, you read it in Hebrew, it's obvious. The word forever is Le'olam, and you can see here I have a graphic that illustrates this. Le'olam has the same vowels as Yehovah, which are the vowels Shvach Olam Kamatz, and this is what it looks like in English. Le'olam, Yehovah. Well, thankfully he goes on, and he says its mnemonic is who in heaven can measure up to you. A mnemonic is an acronym that helps you remember something. English. I'm the first one to translate this into English in 2017. And the word there that's the mnemonic is the word heaven, which normally is the word shamayim, but in this verse the word is shachak. And you say, well, what is that? What's the answer? Well, shachak is an acronym for the vowels Shva, Cholam, Kamatz, which are the vowels of the name Yehovah. So he says, know, my beloved, how extremely difficult it is to put things like this in writing, and even more so a letter sent about from place to place, concerning the vowels of the Tetragrammaton, which are Shva, Cholam, Kamatz. Like,
he openly says it.
He openly says it. Openly. He's not even arguing about that point. He's saying, look, this is really hard to write this. I'm sending this in a letter. It's being carried by donkey or something. I don't know who's going to read this letter. And it says, concerning the Tetragrammaton, its vowels received from Sinai are Shvach Olam Kamatz. There's no room for Yahweh here. It's Yehovah, according to these rabbis. Okay, so I love how Maharam of Lublin, this guy, mayor of Lublin, in 1600, ends a letter to Shabtai Sofer. He says, I have one request, that you hide this letter in a pure and holy place and not allow it to be passed around here and there. When he died, his disciples found a copy of the letter and they printed it. And because of that, we're able to sit here and share this with the entire world. We were never meant to know what's in this letter. But it turns out literally my ancestors were part of the conspiracy to hide our Father's name. And Michael, I have to confess and repent here for the sin of the collective sin of the generations. You know, we have the story in Joshua where they stole they took from the gold, and that they weren't supposed to take from Jericho, and it became a sin, the collective sin of the people. And we have this verse in Jeremiah 23:27. It says, they plan to make my people forget my name. And that's part of my heritage. And I need to go back to what it says in the Bible and not continue the tradition of hiding the name. Now, I have a whole bunch of other sources. I want to end with a rabbi from 1896. He was a rabbi named Jacob Bachrach. And in 1896, he writes a whole bunch of things. I'll read this really quick. He says, if the vowels of the Tetragrammaton were indeed the vowels of Adonay, precision would have required putting Chat of Patach under the Yud for the Aleph of Adonai. Those who don't know what that means, go and research that. Anybody who you tell in scholarship that these are the vowels of the name Yehovah, they'll say, well, no, that's the vowels of Adonai, and here's why. Here's a rabbi in 1896 who says that's utter nonsense, that that's completely a misunderstanding of the vowels